Well, everyone, we're a week before Memorial Day, and I've decided to do a piece that is going to be way easier than what we did last week. Not last week, 2 weeks ago. And it's sort of abstract in a way, but the way I think of it is like a field of poppies. The poppy flower is what's used to like commemorate um or celebrate Memorial Day, but it's a field of poppies arranged to look like a bellowing American flag. Um, and so because it's from so far away, we're not really going to get too much into the details of it. But yeah, so I'm going to use my pencil very briefly just to draw the contours of like the hills that we're going to be painting on. So I'm going to start from the left side of my page, about like 2/3 of the way up. And I'm gonna go like, I'm just gonna make like a nice swoop like that. And then from the right side of my page, a little lower, I'm gonna sort of mirror that. But of course, I placed it lower, so it ends lower. And in this image, I do want it to be like clearly there are 13 stripes. I don't know about 50 stars out of flowers, but we can definitely do um, some stripes. So for the blue part of the flag, I'm going to start drawing a line here and sort of make it curved in a way, or like diagonal. So this is our blue square from the flag. And then we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stripes on the side running perpendicular to the line that we already drew. I'm erasing this because I drew that line way too dark, but they're going to be like perpendicular. And when drawing curved lines, I like to turn my paper around to so that it's like most compatible with the bend of my wrist. So that's 1, 2. So maybe we'll only have 4, or maybe we can just leave it at 3, honestly, right there. I don't know. Let's do like a little. So we have 4. 13 minus 4, so we have 9 stripes left. And so we're just going to so that's 5, 6, 7, 8, and that's 9. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Wait, whoa. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh, I'm short 3 stripes somehow. I'm not good at math. mm, Four plus 7, that's 11. right there. So I actually do need another, so we can just like edit this up here and that should be fine. So we have like we're still not fine. I'm still short one. I don't know how I like got here. My apologies. You know, I'm gonna redivide this tiny because the other thing too is that the further away you are from the vantage point, the like thinner the stripes would be. So I think we can like, because in the original I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, so this is 8. This should be 8 anyway, but it's 7. It's not 8. Two. That's not even no. Well, now it is 8. And then I'm gonna bring this back a little bit. And so now we should have 5 stripes here. 1, 2, 3. All right, now we have 13 stripes. Oh my goodness. And that's it. That is all of the pencil that we are using. And we're gonna go straight into like watercolor now. I like to keep my watercolor paper as clear of like pencil smudges as possible because it kind of, especially if you're using like more budget watercolor, the graphite kind of mixes with the paint and that like makes it a little difficult to work with. So I'm going to take a big brush like this and I'm going to take some green, but like very little and a lot of water, right? So when we have our pigment, the more water we add, the more transparent the pigment is, the less opaque. In other words, the less bold. So I'm just gonna cover all of like the hills with it, with green, because underneath the buds of the flowers would be green. Like if you think about it, like going from top to bottom, from like the dirt to, you know, the blooming bud of the flower, the petals of the flower. And I'm doing a wet on dry application right now because I just want like a really even, simple and easy application. I'm not looking for anything like free flowing just yet. So yeah, we're just going to go all the way all over the whole paper, like after like everything inside where we drew. And you just want to be quick about it. Also, I'm gonna like swipe away these shavings because my brush could potentially pick them up and like just have them locked into my paper. And I'm noticing on camera it looks like way lighter than it actually is. Like this application looks more green in person, like what I'm doing right now. It looks more green to me anyway than what I see on my screen. So be mindful of that as well. You don't need to be as light as you see it. It probably looks more like this than like the rest of that. Could also be the glare of my light a little bit. Huh. So once we finish painting the bottom of the page, green, light green, maybe it would be interesting to sort of do, now we're doing wet on wet and like have it deeper, have the green appear deeper the closer it is. So maybe like the first three stripes right here would be like, a wet on wet is I'm using a wet brush and the paper is already wet. So the pigment is going to spread out a little bit more than it was when I was doing wet on dry. Like it's going to appear a little bit fuzzier, but that's okay. And just like the more you fan out with like the less color, like, yeah, so we kind of have this gradient here. We're going to flip the page like this because now we're going to paint the sky yellow. We're going to do wet on dry again. And I'm just going in with like straight up yellow. As vibrant as I can get it to be. And if I get stuck on the paper, like if I can't spread the pigment anymore, I add more water to my brush because we're doing wet on dry. So it's not going to move as far without its activator. And on this side here, we're going to reapply yellow to our brush and then go on the edge right there. And fill in the rest of the white space in the sky because it's like, what is the term? Dusk or sunset. And so again, we're going to do a wet on wet technique, this time with some orange, just a little bit. We're not going to go too crazy about it. You can see me like mixing. If you have like paint on your palette like this, that's like dry, you can always reactivate it with water, as you just witnessed me doing right here with my brush off to the right. And just very gently like kiss the brush onto the top of the page here, or in this case, the bottom, but you know, the top of the sky. And because it's wet on wet, it'll sort of do the work of blending itself, it won't really, you don't really need to like do that much work, especially if you apply it very lightly, like the water will mix the colors in for you. And that's pretty much the sky done, so we're not going to touch that part of the piece for the rest of the class, like, unless you want to, but I won't. I've had a slight mishap here with some water like moving where it shouldn't and creating these weird water stains, but it's okay. So we got this. Maybe we should, no, I don't know. We got this big blue square here. If you want, you can draw in some stars, the 50 stars, and sort of paint the blue around that. But that is a lot of work and a lot of detail for this otherwise not very detailed piece. So I'm just going to go in with blue. I'm going to use a very thin brush like this. And I'm going to just go straight into my blue here. I don't recall what this would be called, if this would be called something different, but the page right now is not necessarily, it's not all the way wet and it's not all the way dry. I'm touching it and my hand isn't really getting that much moisture off of it, but it's not dry like it was when we first painted the layer on. So I'm gonna load in with a lot of blue on this little bitty brush. And I'm just going to stipple along. And when I run out of juice, when the blue starts getting lighter, I'll reapply. And I'll just like, not haphazardly, but like very quickly without that much thought. I'll go above and below the line here. I'm just like following the line. And like I said, whenever my blue gets too light, I'll get more. And this is essentially what we will be doing for the majority of this piece. To me, this is like a really relaxing thing to do. You might find it tedious, but paintings take a long time, and sometimes they involve repetitive motion. And so I've sort of just learned to accept and embrace that. Usually if I'm on my own, I'll like listen to my favorite music while I do something like this. Yeah, nothing. So for this bottom line, I actually don't want to go below it. Like I've been sort of going above and below these lines here, but I don't want to go below this line because this hill is in front. And if I take the blue flowers below that, it'll sort of break that illusion. And I don't want to do that. So I'll use a lot of pigment and like minimal water to make sure that my strokes don't go below this line. So as you can see on my right, I just go straight into the palette. I don't even like add water to it or anything. I just use the residual like dampness that's already on my brush. And as you can see, I'll zoom in that we can see even better that I am not, I mean, I did right there, but that's okay. It was unintentional. I'm not going below that line. So kind of being more precise and intentional with my movements here than with whatever else, wherever else I was before. Right, and so once we have that, can sort of go in and just like fill in the whole thing, which is usually my favorite part. Let me zoom out all the way again. I like to go in order based on my handedness. So I'm right-handed. So I go from left to right so that if I have to rest my hand above the paper, I'm not touching anything that's like in the process of drying. So if you're left-handed, I recommend you would start from like this side of the flag square. And there's no way to really speed this up besides using a larger brush, but using a larger brush would sort of break the illusion that these flowers are a bit further away. And the flowers up here kind of like bled into the sky, so I will be reapplying those. To sort of minimize that effect. Now that that part of the page is drier, and I'm like pressing the full side of the paintbrush. I'm not just doing like up and down, although you could do that too. Like depending on how you press the brush against the paper, you'll get different shapes and impressions. But I'm sort of resting my arm against my desk, so I was coming at it from an angle. And yeah, all I can say is that this goes way faster when you like listen to music, or if you're like a movie person, like while you're watching a movie or a show or something. It's like a passive task. And another thing, when you use the tip of your brush only, you're being more precise and you're covering less space versus when I start pressing, like you can do like some precise and then like press into it more. to sort of spread the paint out a little bit. You can do it like in clumps like that, like I did that, and then I'm going to, yeah, just work up and down. And just let my hand take me wherever within my designated blue poppy area. Right? So we now just have this like little corner here. Because I'm not leaning my hand on the paper, I feel free to sort of just go wherever and not worry about smearing. But like, seriously, if you're working on like a way bigger canvas too, especially, like, definitely work from opposite of what your handedness is. This is just like a 9x12 piece of paper, so it's not that big, but and of course, if you're accustomed or if you have a habit of like rotating the paper around as you work as well, be mindful of like which parts you just completed so you don't smear anything. So we're honing in here. On the final like open gap. I'm just going to, yeah. I'm pretty sure I use this technique to do any kind of foliage, whether it's trees or vines or something, like if it's far away. In a watercolor piece, like I will just dot in the, like, just suggest that there's foliage. So now we're moving on to red, because the first stripe at the top is red. So we're just going to get this wet, it's completely dry. And yeah, we're going to do the same thing. Just going to dot all the way down. But we're not going to dot below this line or this line, because those lines are in front of this one. And these flowers sort of came up tall above the original line that I drew due to the bleeding, due to the paint bleeding into the sky a little bit. It's nothing that can't be tweaked. Once we complete these further back rows here, stripes, We're gonna switch our brush size. For when we start doing like the further up, closer stripes. We're just gonna do this little corner right there. So we're done with that tiny brush. Now we're gonna move to like a slightly bigger brush. It's not as big as the one we started out with, but we will eventually move to that one too. So like these two, we're gonna do these two stripes with this brush, and then like these two we'll do the biggest brush. And for this, because I'm moving so far along the page, I am gonna go from left to right in case I feel like I'm probably going to rest my hand on the page at like once we start moving up the curve. So, you know, if you have incredible arm strength, you can just leave your arm in the air, but I don't, so. If you leave your arm in the air and only touch the surface with the tip of your paintbrush, you can avoid that altogether. But my arm gets tired, so I have to rest it on the table. And you can see sort of like with the bigger brush how it's kind of going faster because it's just covering more space with each dot. As well. And I'm not pushing the brush like that hard against the paper either. Should be known. That as well. That should be known as well. Now, if this were like acrylic or maybe even oil pastel, I would do the white flowers. But as far as it stands right now, I don't know how to do white anything with watercolor without just like leaving the page white. Especially in a piece like this. Like if I were doing a close-up of a white flower, I'd probably use like blue as like the shadow to accentuate the form. But these flowers are all far away, so they don't get anything. They will get something, but not, you might not be like satisfied with that, and that's okay. The thing I like about this piece is that you can sort of endlessly like take it further and further. We won't do that in this class because we only have so much time, but you certainly can, and I encourage you to. But we'll get to that when we get to that. Right now, we are doing the stripe. So this process is made sort of shorter by the fact that we don't have any white watercolor paint to add. So we only have to do like half the stripes. in this process, which is pretty cool. Pretty cool for me who has to get this done in a timely manner. Maybe cool for you too if you don't feel like spending a million years on an art piece. If you procrastinate and you want to make this for somebody for Memorial Day, and you know, time management is difficult, I understand. Luckily, this doesn't take super, super long. We're definitely past the halfway point already. All right. Maybe we'll have some more poppies like sticking out. We're going to go back to the original size brush we used for these last two stripes right here, because they are the closest. I'm just going to get all up in that red, and you can just see like how big we got it going on, how much water we got going on. And so because we worked from top to bottom when we were painting, or at least because I did, I hope you did too. Because we worked from top to bottom when we painted the grass, and then again when we were painting the poppies, by the time like we finished this and we start again up here, the top of the hill is dry and so on. And like by the time we get down here, the green that we painted is also dry enough that it won't like bleed and mix. So that's another thing to be mindful of. Like when you do watercolor pieces, you want to work you don't want to work against yourself in that like the next step is right after the next layer is like right after you just did a wet area that's like still wet. You know, you want to like think ahead a little bit and plan out how you do it. And if once you do it enough times, like kind of becomes second nature, like you just work back and forth. With paint in general, but definitely with watercolor, like you just end up working back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So you can stop right here. I'm going to go a little bit further, especially because we have quite a bit of time. I'm going to go in with this like little teeny tiny brush we were using earlier that was taking so long. Oh my gosh, remember that? I'm going to dip into this green and I'm going to take off any excess, and I'm going to very gently like draw like do little flicks of grass and the white stripe. And you don't want to like start the flicks at the same level. You sort of want to like stagger them because they're staggered. So these would sort of be like the stems. And I would advise against making them super dark and bold. But of course, if you have one that is, it's okay. Also. Maybe they're like crisscrossing. blue. And of course, like up here, they're gonna come up off the hill a little bit. Like little hairs. Kind of missing some water there. There we go. For water-based paint, like acrylic paint, gouache paint, watercolor paint, if you notice your paint getting dry on your brush and it's like hard to spread, you just add a little bit of water. Just a little bit. You don't need to add that much. Like if you still want, the heavy pigment in there. So I'm being very gentle and like tickling the paper with this brush, like I'm really not pressing the brush super hard on it. Because I don't know, I find like with elements of nature, like it's just easier for me to improvise it, go in without planning, instead of me like sitting here and deciding, mulling over like where each stem is gonna go. Like it's not how I like to draw elements of nature for sure. And when we get to these rows here, I'm gonna switch to the medium brush. Like, yeah. And do the same thing. Because again, we're closer, so they're gonna appear slightly bigger, but not big enough that it's like super detailed, because we're still pulled back from the view so that we can see the whole thing. I'm gonna avoid this here at the bottom because it's still wet. And I don't want to spread that where it doesn't need to go. See, like this already got mixed in. And this is like, this zone right here is a little too wet for me for comfort. If you're impatient, you can go tear off a piece of paper towel and like have it just soak up some of the water. My only gripe with this is that it also soaks up the pigment. So sometimes I just like to let it dry as is. Going back with the green and the little baby brush, what we're gonna do is add some like green dots all over our red and blue. Not as condensed, so like more sporadic. And probably not so large either. I started out making like really large dots. I don't want that. I want like tiny dots. But because it's green on blue, it's kind of hard to see anyway. But definitely like once we move on to the red, like these should be little baby dots. And just so for the red, I try to put it in like the white spaces. It's okay if I don't get a bullseye, a tail on a donkey, if you will. Just sort of like the general area of where like some white gaps are. And I guess like the same should have been said for the blue. So this is probably like the only thing, if you want to take more time with and be more methodical, you certainly can and should. Especially because you don't have to place as many green dots as we did, like red and blue too. So because there's less ground to cover, you have the freedom to be more careful about it in terms of like time efficiency. And there's just like not a lot of white gaps here, so that's not going to stop me from putting some green down. This red and green together reminds me of like watermelon. I'm using like super pigmented green. I'm not doing it watered down because first of all, I want the green to show like really, really strongly, like not like this green, but like like a rich green. And the other thing too, if I add too much water, it'll spread out too far. And I really want these to be like more precise placements. Of color as well. And these areas are still kind of damp. So if your stripe is still damp, I wouldn't recommend you like go in with the green because it'll spread out in the water. So, you know. But yeah, this is it's pretty much what you're gonna get minus this bottom right corner here. I'm gonna go back in with some blue and like bring the blue back up here because these green dots are super big. And I kind of didn't want that. Like those up there are super big. They look dark now, it's just because they're wet, but once they dry off, it'll be fine. Please let me know if you have any questions. Certainly, like if you want, after this dries, you can go in with a pencil, preferably a colored pencil, and like maybe draw some floral outlines. Certainly, like in the frontmost rows up here, like down here. Like that would be pretty cool. Or if you have acrylic paint, like going in, making this a full mixed media piece would be really, really awesome. If you have like white acrylic paint, like going in and doing the white flowers on top of the stems, even like that would be pretty cool as well. You can use the negative space in the sky to write a note or a letter or something and give this, if you have a fallen veteran to visit, you want to like write something for them, you can write it here like in the sky. I don't have anyone in my family or that I know of, but certainly you can if you want to. You can even paint it on, do some calligraphy as well. Of course, again, once the paper is dry. There's a lot of things, there's a lot of fun things you can do with this piece. But yeah, it's not, unless I had like a fan, this drying process isn't really going to get much faster. I don't think it'll dry before the class ends, so I'm just gonna leave it at that right now.